We acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to This Song Is Yours, the podcast where we dive into the art of songwriting, uncover the creative processes behind the music and celebrate the artists who bring it all to life. I'm your host, Simon Fink, and thank you for joining us. Our guest on the podcast today is beloved alt-pop songwriter Andy Bull. The ARIA Award nominated and Emmy Award winning songwriter and producer has long been adored by Aussie audiences, having toured with artists like Claire Bowditch, Lisa Mitchell, Joss Stone and Tim Finn. His music has resonated widely, with multiple tracks landing in the Triple J Hottest 100 and his breakthrough record, Sea of Approval, firmly establishing his place in the alt-pop world. Last week, Andy released his latest album, Collapse in Bliss, a record that is not only sonically stunning, but also showcases his multifaceted talent as a songwriter, instrumentalist, producer, and mixer. Now, in today's episode, we're thrilled to chat with Andy Bull about Collapse in Bliss and why he chose to set certain limitations on his creative process this time around. We discuss the idea that a song's length doesn't necessarily reflect its quality, and we also dive into his current approach to touring, where he's leaving plans in the hands of the universe. Now, we want to say a massive thank you to Jerry for her help with today's episode and remind everyone that Collapse in Bliss is out right now. You can find links in the show notes to stream the record and immerse yourself in Andy's incredible work. While you're there, don't forget to follow us across our social media channels and check out our website to stay up to date with all of our upcoming guests and episodes. And with that, let's jump into our conversation with Andy Bull. Please welcome to This Song Is Yours, Andy Bull. Hello, sir. How are we?
My friend, I'm very well. It's lovely to meet you. Thank you for having me on your show. I've been very excited for this.
Oh, look, my absolute pleasure. And likewise, I'm very excited to have you on. I know it's kind of been a while between projects and releases for yourself, and I don't think we were up and running last time. So I'm super excited to kind of have you on to talk about this brand new record, Collapse in Bliss. How are you feeling with this record being out?
It's kind of unlike any other record I've put out in terms of the experience I had making it and also the experience of putting it out. It's been like universally lovely and kind of life affirming. And I think I was saying to you before we started recording, like, you know, you work on these projects and they're just an idea for a long time that might actually not lead to any kind of, you don't know that it's going to end up anywhere, that it will even be released or finished. So this is such a beautiful moment because when you put it out, you have this small window of days, weeks if you're lucky, where you finally get to talk to people about it and what you've been doing alone in a dark room for months, and kind of share some of the story and reflect back on it. It's kind of like talk therapy because you get to go, yeah, what did I do? What was it about? And that's, like, for me, hugely valuable, kind of talking it out. So this has been such a joy. Yeah.
100%. Has so far in all the press that you've done, has anything changed perspective? Have you found that much has changed since recording the record?
Well, you know, the doing this record was such a process of becoming aware of my own perspective, the limitations of it, the values I have, the way that I have assumed things have to happen, or the way that the creative process should look, or assumptions about what an album should even be. So I've been having this kind of ongoing discussion with myself up here about perspective for a couple of months. So now it's simply like I'm getting to have that conversation with witnesses present, which is you today. Lucky you.
I kind of love that, though. And it is a gorgeous sounding record. I want to kick things off kind of by talking about the sonics of this record. It is a lovely sounding headphone record. For anyone who has had the pleasure so far of listening to it, congratulations. If you have not, please put on some good headphones, some good proper earpods good headphones in 2024? Something that allows you to experience it.
I certainly listened to it a lot on AirPods when I was making it. So when I was kind of creating the sonic environment and working at how it sounds, you listen. I mix and mastered the whole thing up here alone on these little. You can't see behind me, but I've got some like fairly cheap entry level studio monitors like KRK Rocket 5. So there's nothing fancy at all. I listened to the record there, a little bit in the car, and then on AirPods as well. So between those three things, I kind of got a close enough sense, I suppose, to how it all translated. So I think the AirPods or whatever you listen to is kind of perfect. I would reference in there to make sure I could hear the space, hear the detail, hear the relevant parts of the arrangement, all that sort of thing in these tiny little things. So there's kind of, I think technically that's part of the art form, is making it translate to something this big, and then also, a big bassy car stereo as well. I feel like if you can create an arrangement, even more so than a mix, but an arrangement that breathes in all those spaces, then you can mix for it as well, to make sure that you've got the warmth and the power in the low end, the detail and the presence and the soul in the middle, and then the kind of clarity and the air up top. If you can get those sort of sounding like they all live in reasonable relationship to one another across all those places, then that's kind of the art of the technical aspect at the end. But all of that is facilitated so much by song and actual arrangement, so the instruments that are playing. And that was one of the really amazing learning experiences of this whole journey, is how to make things sound full and immersive and direct and intimate with as few elements as possible, a few kind of deliberately, intentionally chosen elements. Like, can you tell a story with a few things that have real character, and create a space that invites people in to experience it and feel as if they're actually in a real moment in time and space? Yeah.
I know that for this record, you did kind of do exactly that. You did put certain limitations on yourself, on how you wanted to create these songs, as you said, how they were recorded, produced, mixed. First, I guess, where did it, because in 2024, with artists having, I don't want to say unlimited access, but obviously very lucky to have access to technology and certain things that you could create an orchestra with your mobile phone these days, as an example. What was the idea behind not going the other way, but almost making it a little bit more difficult for yourself in terms of putting those limitations on? And then, I guess, how did you... Actually, we'll start with that. What brought on that initial idea of putting limitations on?
A number of things, which I will now try to lay out in some kind of cohesive fashion for you. Firstly, the last couple of years I've been playing a lot of solo shows. So just me with a keyboard and a drum machine and my voice. And it's the most minimal, but even the word minimal is slightly misleading, but certainly the most restrained format of live performance I've ever done. And yet also somehow it's felt like the most engaging or immediate or cohesive. And realizing that even in that very, very small iteration, that very limited iteration, that most of the things which I can offer as a songwriter and performer or artist that are present in that really small iteration. So for me, it was about having the relief of having the humility to say, look, I think what I offer is I sing songs, and if I can facilitate the singing of those songs in a way that is not, I haven't gilded the lily or distracted or overly complicated what I'm doing with performative academics and tried to make it interesting in some intellectual way, it's felt more and more immediate and more weirdly more nuanced than if there was more stuff happening. So that really informative process the last couple of years of playing solo and going, wow, this is everything. Most of what I do is present here in the rawest of form. And in fact, I could, if I had nothing with me, I could still sing a song. I could still sing, I could still make sound. I can still tell a story. I can still calm my nervous system and the nervous systems of those around me simply by singing a melody. And I was like, oh, maybe that's what I do. Maybe that's, of all the ideas I've had, for instance, when I started self-producing in 2013 or 14 and I did my first record, Sea of Approval, I still wanted to, I think, prove that I could manage all these textures and parts and make it a really immersive, complex environment. And it worked. But I think it worked because of the fact that in the middle of it all is just a voice singing a melody. And so you kind of having the humility to go, well, I have to play shows solo and I'm going to try to make that beautiful. It's not going to be loud and innovating. It might not be the most the most aggressive or forthright of sound, but do I have the humility to make my small offering, which is just to sing, like in a really simple way, sing a song with a keyboard and a drum machine. And I think I learned that the voice is hugely powerful and contains so much nuance, not only in the words, but in the timbre and the delivery. I play, might not be like keyboard sounds that feel really emotive to me, and then a drum machine that feels really emotive. There's not heaps going on, but everything working there is working in prosody with one another and is deeply characterful. Like this keyboard, the Roland Juno, which I use a lot, but also the Prophet and some other bits and pieces, they're stars. Like they're stars. Some people built these, and in fact, these are they're what's the word I'm looking for? They're like they are the concentrated point of the physical manifestation of actually the vision of many people over decades. Deeply creative people who might not write songs but who understand sound and the choices they made here and the way that you use the instrument and the way that it comes out sounding. They're actually works of art in themselves, and it's a total privilege to use them. A privilege. It's like I was just watching Lord of the Rings last week, feeling nostalgic, and the way they go on about like the artifacts, like the sword of Isildur or whatever it is, like the way like there's been thought and care and like there's a spirit in this artifact, this talisman, and that's kind of like, well, so these things really, these are the talismans. So to work with them and to carry the spirit of all the people who made them is actually a massive privilege. Not about having all of the things, but I have like this, I feel like I have a close relationship with these instruments. Not saying I'm like the greatest virtuoso on all of them. I get around them okay, but they bring so much. So my voice, these instruments, like there's a lot in there. It tells a story. There's a relationship between these elements that creates a world. And that was the first part of the answer that I was giving. And in my enthusiasm to tell you about my tools, I've forgotten what the initial question was. And I want to give you part two of the question. Can you remind me what the question was?
I guess it was
more so like, you.
What was the inspiration in terms of putting those limitations on yourself when we do in this day and age kind of have so much available to us?
There it is. Thank you. So yeah, the other thing I say a lot is we live in a time of infinite content and information. It's this roaring torrent of sound and visual and data that pummels us constantly. And that's very disorientating for a human nervous system, I believe, because everything is saying it's the most important, most salient thing for you to focus on currently, which of course is impossible. And so it all becomes unimportant. And, you open up your app, your Instagram app, and any one of those pieces of content would have been like really monumental viral moments 15 years ago. But it's just noise now. And so I was thinking about the instant and infinite nature of content, music included, the infinite and instant nature of identity, instant identity, instant content, infinite identity, infinite content. And it's like reached escape velocity, and it's become, as a result, difficult to experience with any kind of meaning or contrast. So if you are to participate as an artist in this time in history, then part of the joy for you will be in working out what are the things that you can do that feel true to you specifically and feel meaningful to you specifically, not meaningful to a platform or some imagined future reward or something like that. But like, what do you have to say? What do you already have to say? What do you already feel? So in choosing your limitations, it's not necessarily about conjuring limitations or conjuring a perspective out of thin air. It's about going, what's the perspective that I already have that I will discover if I'm willing to listen and look at who I already am and what I'm already doing. And you might kind of discover your superpower, and nobody wants the superpower they have. Everybody wants some other person's superpower, but this is part of the Jungian process of becoming the whole integrated person, is to look at what you are, what you already have, the story you already have, and to work with that to try to transform that. So that's another aspect of why I chose the limitations, because it was like all else feels arbitrary. Thirdly, I set myself a limited time to do this record. So I was like, I don't have forever. I have to know pretty clearly what my weapons are going in, what my values are going in. And this record is like, a record is just a moment in time and place. And if you want it to feel like a moment in time, a genuine moment in time and space, then you have to, it has to truly be that. So I set myself this limit of 60 nights. I got pneumonia and it became 40 nights. And I knew that if I was going to be able to manage all of the technical and logistical and creative aspects throughout the whole process, from writing the initial songs all the way to mixing and mastering, it would have to be simple enough for me to do with my own intellectual limitations and my resource limitations, which is a pair of KRK speakers, an audio interface, and a couple of instruments. But the intellectual limitations is a big one, because we've all had moments in our career where we're working on something we believe is our like magnum opus, and there's like 80 tracks of audio on the page, and you think they're all fantastic, but yet you can't tie it together into anything that says anything clearly. There's just too much noise. Signal to noise ratio is wrong or not conducive to a clear message. And so I was like, in order for me to be able to even do this, I have to say this has to be things like 3 or 4 pieces of audio happening at the same time, voice, something melodic, something harmonic, something rhythmic, and then maybe some other ambient aspect happening. If it becomes more than that, more complex than that, it will become too difficult for me to manage all of these songs over a short period of time. It would be too difficult for my mind to manage, to keep track of. And because even one, there's this lovely interplay between the logistical realities of what you're doing and then the art, the creative, generative stuff that comes out at the end of it. They're not disconnected from one another. So it's those 3 things: considerations about identity and instant content and the meaninglessness of that milieu, the live experience of realizing what it is I actually have or might be able to offer, and then just the logistical constraints. There you go, I landed it.
Full 10 out of 10 point card at the end for a beautiful landing for that. Thank you very much, Andy, because people don't usually go as in-depth as that. And so I very much appreciate you kind of sharing that insight. One thing that I think is kind of incredible with that is self-control, in terms of, as I've said, a lot of musicians, and you kind of touched on it with, I think, the third answer then, in terms of that you've got this magnum opus in your mind. You think it can be as grand and as broad as whatever you kind of want it to be. But I think it does take an element of self-control to be able to then stick to that and execute it like that as well, and not kind of have one thought or idea that then, derails it or kind of takes it in another kind of fashion. I was hoping to quickly talk about one of my favorite tracks on the record. It was kind of the shortest track on the record, and that is not the reason why it's my favorite. The reason why it kind of stuck out to me.
Sure. Is that a backhand? It was my favorite because
It was a song that I felt I could have listened to for another 2 to 3 minutes, and it was only a minute and a half long. The track was called, excuse me, I Don't Know Why. And it's this gorgeous, like, minute and a half. I think it was like just maybe a minute 40 track. There's a beautiful, sultry kind of groove to it almost. Like there's a slinkiness to the music. I was wondering whether you might be able to tell us a bit more just about that track or where it kind of came from.
I think it was one of the last to be finished for the record. I wanted to have some live sounding drums on the record, and I had some which I like some live drums which I used to make the drum groove in that track. Drum groove is such a dorky word, no matter how you say it. Drum groove sounds like something a music school teacher would use to describe a really uncool song. But nevertheless, it has a drum groove. The song, yeah, it is really quick. But I felt like it kind of, yeah, it could have, you could have doubled the length or done a bridge or something like that. But I felt like it's sort of, I didn't want it to overstay its welcome. It seems to like come in and then bloom and go somewhere, and then I'm happy for it to move on into the next part of the next song in the record. I like that song. I mean, I really like that song, but one of the nice things about that song is there's a couple of vocal moments that really open up. And yeah, I wonder if there's something about the ratio of like, if you really open up, you can't open up for too long. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's that ratio of intensity to length. So there's this moment of opening up and expanding, but you can't do that for 10 minutes maybe, or you have to increasingly open up further and further. And so I think I conceptualize that song as a movement in the whole body of work, and if you like it, you just sort of listen to it again. But it is it's kind of takes from the previous song and then moves to it's like a movement towards the next one as well. But yeah, lyrically, how does that song go? Tell you something for free, things aren't what they should be. I hear somebody crying, I don't know why. Yeah, it was really simple. And then in the second, so the refrain is, I hear someone crying, I don't know why. And then later on the song it goes, I still hear someone singing. So it's sort of like this, despite the suffering, there's still the voice singing. There's still that hope and persistent belief in love and possibility, despite the protagonist of the song saying they hear someone crying and like praying, like show me the way to go, sort of thing. What's the line? Like, help me find the way on time. Like just that one simple line of like, so I think I like that because it in a few words, it sort of gives an arc of a human arc, if that makes sense.
It definitely does. And thank you very much for sharing that. It is, I think you've used the word flourishes and then kind of moves on, which I think is a perfect way to describe it. It doesn't ever overstay its welcome. And I think that's maybe part of the magic of it, is that it, as you said, people don't open up for 10 minutes straight. It's that thing of there's a magic and chemistry in the track right there and then, and it kind of then moves on. And it does leave you wanting more, which I think is why it is such a gorgeous track. Curious, Andy, whether I think someone might have asked you on social media somewhere in the last day or so whether there are some shows coming. I did see there were some support slots, I think, over the last month or so, but curious as to whether we might be able to put in the calendar some dates for next year in support of the record.
Once upon a time I would have said something like I have 100 shows coming up, and but it's funny. I've said yes to everything I've been invited to do, and I will continue to say yes to anything that I'm invited to do. But I have no world-conquering ambitions to tour the world and convince everyone to show up and convince everyone to care. This whole creative process has been, I feel like I've just been following instructions from elsewhere, and that's how I'm going to continue. So if invitations come in or something really makes sense to to do some tour or something, if it feels right, then I'll absolutely do it. But I'm working in collaboration with the forces of the universe. So if nothing happens and this record comes now and it has its little moment and disappears back into the ether, I think the only ambition I had was to sing Hallelujah, and I've done that. So if I get to continue singing Hallelujah in the form of live shows, I will. But like I say, I'm not here to rattle the cage or take over the world. So yeah, nothing planned is the very short answer.
Look, totally fair with that. And again, hoping that the universe maybe does deliver, maybe this conversation manifests some kind of invitation or approach so that we get to, maybe selfishly, I'm just saying that, but so that we get to see you out on the road and on more shows. Andy, we usually kind of wrap up our conversations asking our guests what they're currently listening to. For yourself, anything on high rotation at the moment?
Yeah, I can sort of answer this question. So some records I really love at the moment is Mother by Cleo Sol. Mm-hmm. I also really enjoy McGee at the moment, sort of just kind of new to that. There's an act out of Melbourne who I played with recently called Beryl, who I think are excellent, really stunning, and they're putting out new music at the moment, so look out for Beryl. Recently, a really dear friend of mine named Jack Colwell passed away, and I was invited to write a piece about Jack's music for a media publication, and I wrote about his record Swan Dream, which is really, it's kind of revisiting that in the weeks after he died. It was quite an emotional thing. So that one as well is in my mind too. But those things I think are kind of in the consciousness currently. Yeah.
I love that. A bit of an eclectic taste across those records. There's some elements that kind of, I think, cross over in the Venn diagram of those few different bands, but they're not all within the same vein. Like the McGee album is very different from the Cleo Sol one. So I kind of love those different kind of elements of it. That's exquisite taste.
There are so many ways. I know. And you for having me on this show. No, there are so many ways to make perfect music. And this was one of the amazing things. This is what I'm going to land this. I'm going to wrap this up. But when I was working my music, I had certain music. When I was working on this record, I had certain music I would listen to, not to reference or to copy, but just to things that were wildly different records that I had loved over the years, from like Feist to Kanye West to James Blake to Todd Rundgren to Sugar Otis to whatever it was, just to remind me these are all completely different records. They're all perfect. There's no one way in to doing something beautiful. And this record has a completely different set of rules, sonically, thematically, aesthetically, to this record, and yet you hold them both in the same esteem. And I was like, somewhere in this pantheon, there's a place for you, if you can believe in what you're doing, if you can believe in your rules and make your work true to itself, you can do something just as good and just as different, and it will sit there. And in my mind, that's what I've done. But that's my interpretation, and not everyone. In fact, almost no one will agree with me. But that's what I think I've done. Is I've tried to give something true unto itself that has a totally different set of rules. So if anyone is working on any creative project, it's sometimes useful to remember how many ways you can do something perfectly, even if those ways appear antithetical. The through line is that they're true unto themselves. Yeah.
I absolutely love that, Andy. Thank you so much for coming to have a chat on the podcast. You obviously are very not enthusiastic. Like, you obviously love what you do, and you love not just the music itself, but the process of making music. So I'm extremely stoked that we kind of got to chat today. More than welcome back anytime you'd like, sir. The new record, Collapse in Bliss, is out now. We'll make sure that links are in today's show notes for people to stream the record, follow you on socials, all that kind of stuff. But thank you again, Andy, for coming to chat.
My pleasure. So thanks so much for having me.